Hello, everybody, and welcome to Boss Talks episode 41. We have a great guest today, Heather Sizemore. She's been in student housing her entire career, spanning roughly 20 years, I believe. And she's been all over the country. She's been multiple companies. Currently, she is the Senior Vice President of Operations in student housing for RPM Living. So she's heading up their student housing in that particular company. But she's known by so many. There's been a lot of people cheering her on for this episode, and I hope to have a lot of you on the show today as part of the audience, because that always makes for a good show. So we're going to have a great conversation, and I really look forward to getting there. But before we do, I'm Evan Happel. I'm your host with Community Boss. We have some great solutions when it comes to property technologies, when it comes to software, to really manage the physical aspects of your community, whether that's parking, amenities, or mapping. We really help you manage those spaces and maximize the use of them, the efficiencies, operations, and also get a little more value out of your community by generating some revenue. So if you have any questions about that, reach out. But let's get into it. Let's bring Heather to the show. Hey, Heather.
Hi, Evan. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here all the way on the other side. I keep having guests that are in Florida, and I literally am on the other opposite end of the United States, up in Seattle. So we definitely are going intercontinental, I guess, but or continental across the United States, which is awesome. And I really appreciate you being here to be on Boss Talks.
Yeah, I'm super excited for the chat today.
So there's been a number of guests that I've already had, and then future guests that I'm going to have that know you, that are friends and or mentors or in relationships of that nature with you or have had. Carol, I know you guys are definitely friendly and known each other quite a while. And in the future, I'm going to have Lindsay, was it Holland?
Yes.
She also knows you and mentioned you when we were talking. So when I brought the fact that you were going to be on the show up, especially to Lindsay, she just really got excited about that and the fact that you were going to be on the show. And I believe we got connected because of Leah. Is that?
Oh yeah, Leah. Yeah, Leah Love. I mean,
yeah.
So all of us started in student housing.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, Lindsay and I worked together when she was an on-site manager in Kentucky. And oh my gosh, I don't even know where Carol was at. Carol, I think, was in Kentucky too at the time when we first connected. And I mean, obviously she's, spending a lot of time across the country in her new role. But it's one of the things I love most about this industry is you just make lifelong friendships and connections. And even for the two of them who aren't operating as managers in student housing any longer, we still stay closely connected. We chat, we text each other. And Carol will randomly send me a message at 9:30 at night and ask for some document that we made 10 or 12 years ago. So it's a great, it's just a great network of people, both professionally and personally.
Yeah. Yeah. It's especially student housing. You guys are such a, I feel like you all know each other.
There's a huge group of us that know each other. And we always say that, and especially how incestuous it is, but whether it's people, we, come and go from different companies and you interact, and next thing you know, you're meeting at the site because one of you's, taking over management from the other, vice versa, or they move to the vendor side in Lindsay's case. Yeah, there's a lot, but the more we go to conferences, there's a newer generation that are upcoming. And sometimes I'm like, well, I'm surprised I don't know as many people here as I used to.
That's true.
The industry as a whole has grown so much and developed over the last 10 years, especially exponentially with the number of properties and beds. But the core group of people who really were in it to win it, so to speak, whenever we became more recognized and known through institutional investors, and really made a name for our space, and had people on Wall Street looking and as a valid and worthwhile real estate investment instead of just crazy people who wanted to, deal with students and everything that's absolutely insane about what we do day in and day out. So it's been a wild ride over the last 23 years. A lot has changed, and some of it just is exactly the way it's always been.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I remember back, I think we were in college around the same time. I graduated in '06. But at that point, I don't know how prevalent student housing, like not connected to the university, at least in where I went in Oregon,
Mhm.
um, how common it was. And I'm sure it's just grown dramatically in the last 20 years for sure. Um, but back then, I mean, the options were very limited, at least in my case. So I'm
I
sure
mean,
the landscape has definitely changed.
it's definitely changed. It's expanded. 20 years ago, it was still newer, but common, and especially in your tier one, your larger, flagship universities, there were plenty of by the bed options to choose from. But certainly in second and tertiary markets, that they just didn't really exist. Or when it
Yeah.
started rolling out, and someone would develop. There was a huge learning curve because the market didn't understand what it meant to lease by the bed. And your phone would ring off the hook. They're like, yes, I want a 4-bedroom for $400 a month. You're like, but that's per person, not for the entire apartment. It's a very confusing time for some.
Yeah, definitely. Well, cool. I want to first, before we get into anything else, I want to just ask some just kickoff questions to get, acquainted and have a
Sure.
little fun.
Okay.
So, one thing I like to ask is, we are community boss, and I am a big fan of building community just in my background in history. So I like to ask, what is it that you do to create community, both personally and professionally?
Sure. Well, I think professionally, so much of our business is built around the community that we serve, right? So it is that relationship that we have with the university has always been one. It's been polarizing. A lot of universities were very quick to embrace the off campus and the student housing market, and some immediately saw us as competitors and still do today. But enhancing the community within how we partner with higher education in providing housing has always been an important part of our business model, and developing those relationships to let the university, whether it's admissions orientations, the sports teams, the Greek life, the actual housing, Department of Housing and Residence Life at the different universities, to let them know that we truly want to be a partner. We want to be a part of the community, and release the stigma of slumlords, if you will, because that
Mm,
was initially the impression that had to be overcome. And so once they started understanding that it's in everyone's best interest for the students to have a great experience off campus, because that means they're going to stay enrolled at the universities. And then we were able to bridge these true partnerships. And for me, I went to University of Central Florida here in Orlando, where I still live, and we had great relationships with our university. And we'd have the UCF Police Department come out and do programs. We'd have the Counseling and Testing Center. We'd sponsor the rec teams. So within the business, it makes everyone's lives easier to work together, and ultimately the winner is the client, the resident for us, and it's the student to again have a great experience while they're enrolled in college, and help them be successful and to stay stay enrolled and graduate, which is what all the universities ultimately want.
right.
Personally, for me, it's a lot of things that have to do with my kids. I believe it's they have so much going on, and as they're getting older, I have four, so the twins are 10. They just turned 10, and then Kennedy just turned 9 2 days ago, and the little guy Liam will be 7. So they're all still in elementary school, but they're growing up, and they're growing up with electronics and having to have conversations about what it means to be a good kid, be a good person, how that translates into school. I think developing your network in your community where you live locally, for me, and how I engage with uh, other neighbors, literally the neighbors in my neighborhood, because my kids are playing with their kids, and how this has been real. Like they get in a tiff and then the parents are messaging us on Facebook that so-and-so said something to my kid. You're like, really? This is what we're doing now? We're messaging each other on Facebook instead of knocking on my door to talk about it.
Right.
So, just trying to be a part of my kids' lives in every way possible, participating in their school events, volunteering. They're all into sports. So volunteering at Babe Ruth or popcorn or football. I with everything being so digital and online, we're trying to do everything we can to engage and interact and, just try to make it a little bit more like it was when we were growing up as kids. Not saying that ever will be, but bringing back a piece of that, having dinner together every night, throwing end of the year pool parties for the kids to, have their friends over from school. It's just things like that.
Yeah. Well, that's good. It's definitely important that we try to instill some of the things of the past. To say that they're things of the past is just weird.
It is weird.
To be in person with people and like encourage hanging out in person with friends is like something you actually have to have a conversation about instead of just texting or video chatting or whatever.
Yeah. And it's teaching the kids too to give back. We look for volunteer opportunities, again, whether it's at the school and whether it's the food pantry or the concession stand. And they're getting old enough now that they can actually participate, and we can have conversations about what it means to give our time to help other people. And so, I hope that starting them young and being part of that will naturally evolve for them into choosing to do that as they get older, especially as teenagers and entering college, and doing what they can to help others.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I think if it's modeled and you're doing it and they're doing it, then it's definitely something that they'll continue with. So that's great.
Yeah.
So along the lines of community, a great way to do that is having people over for dinner. And so if you were to have someone over for dinner, what would you or your significant other or maybe the restaurant make for them?
Well, Nikki, my significant other, definitely is a way better cook than I am. So if we were cooking inside, she's the one cooking 100%.
Okay.
But I do love to grill now that we've got our outdoor space ready to go and we live in Florida. So I would grill some delicious steaks, and we would have twice baked potatoes and grilled veggies and a salad on the side.
Nice. Well, that sounds delicious. And you can definitely get away with grilling more often through the year.
Yeah, we grill year round.
Yeah. I can do it for like 4 months out of the year. Otherwise, trying to heat up the barbecue when it's cold and rainy is actually really hard. I've tried.
I could imagine. Yeah. This past weekend, the wind was blowing super hard. So I, went out after I thought it was heated, and it was. And then 5 minutes later, I went back and I was like, oh, wow, the temperature's dropping. I'm like, did the wind blow it out? And I actually thought about the cold. I was like, oh, wow, what do people up north do? They can't grill because of the temperature.
Right.
I ran out of propane.
Yeah, exactly. You're just fighting a losing battle at that point.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And then finally, we are up in the Northwest, Seattle. What is your favorite coffee drink?
If I want something hot, I go for a chai tea latte, which is not technically coffee, I know, but still love it.
Hot drink.
And cold drinks, I love a nitro cold brew with sweet cream.
Yeah, I do. I like to lean into the cold brews also. If people don't know, if coffee irritates your tummy, cold brew is less acidic because it's not cooked. So
I didn't know that.
It's just sitting in the beans or the grounds, I guess. And so you don't have the acid being released. So
interesting.
Just a little fun fact there.
Good to know.
Yeah. So if anybody has a coffee or, the acidity of coffee bothers you, go with the cold brew. I tend to love that because the acid, there was a few times where I was working in person at an office and they had free flowing coffee. And I just started to just down those cups of coffee, like 4-5 cups in a day. I was
Oof.
like, oh, this is not good on my tummy.
No, no. And I've had the opportunity to visit a couple Starbucks reserves.
Oh,
And
okay.
man, whatever the reserve coffee, I'm not a coffee connoisseur, but I know that that coffee is delicious and it's smooth and it's not
Mm.
bitter and it's absolutely delicious. And so there's a good thing that we don't have one nearby, because I would definitely be a frequent visitor and my bank account would hurt from it.
Hey, it already hurts when it's like now $8 for a medium-sized drink.
Yeah,
But,
it's rough.
whatever.
It's
Can't do
fine.
that every day. Well, thank you for answering those questions. I like to learn these little tidbits about my guests, and I think they're interesting. We usually have like debates going on over food and things like that. So
I love to eat.
yes, definitely. All right. So there's a few things that you shared that are great things to like ponder over and think about. And one of those was knowing your worth, but also proving your worth, which I think is good, because a lot of times we just start with and end with knowing your worth.
Hmm.
And then we're just like, just know your worth. But it's like, how do you show it to other people? So like, what is it that you, I guess, how you've come to that mantra,
Yeah.
so to speak?
Yeah. So over the years, it's just been a lot lately, the last couple of years. I have people that sometimes I know and we have a working relationship. Sometimes they message me on LinkedIn and, hey, I know we've never met, but I followed you. And, will you talk to me? I just have some questions and I'd love an outside opinion. They're in the industry, but they don't really want somebody who's biased because we work for the same company, or, I know who their direct supervisor is, whatnot. And I love having those conversations. And so, um, the know your worth part comes from, and I've had probably 4 to 5 of these conversations in the last 3 months, which I find very interesting, about employees that they are interested in positions that I've posted. And their story is, I've been at XYZ company years, love the company, love the people I work with, but I haven't been afforded the opportunity, you know? And so they've basically felt like they've been passed over. And so for them, they're coming to terms with knowing their worth, that I can only be loyal to some extent. I've been here for 5, 6, 7, I've heard 10 and 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they see others in the same capacity being promoted and they weren't even interviewed. Right.
Yeah.
And so they're starting to see where perhaps um, internal politics, personal relationships are driving who's getting career opportunities and who's not. And so they're starting to know their worth, to say, I've given my all to this company for some period of time, right?
Yeah.
I need to go somewhere where I'm valued. And that's been talked about a lot lately. And I really don't want to go down the whole COVID path, right? But it's definitely given people time and opportunity to reflect and really think about what's important to them, where they're at, where they want to go, and start making decisions. But the flip side of that, which I also feel as equally strong about, is proving
Yeah.
your worth. And just as many conversations have been had with um, people who knock it out of the park, do a phenomenal job 1 year, and they're ready to be promoted. You're like, whoa, like, there's no discounting how fantastic you are as anything, leasing manager, community manager, right? And they're ready and interviewing for this next step, and they haven't shown how they can excel under a multitude of circumstances. And this is especially true with, this last year, where, look, let's be honest, just about everybody's knocking out of the park. Everybody's leasing up, everybody's raising rents. So if
Yeah.
you're coming in and this has been your first 12 to 18 months under these conditions, you know, great, but what challenges have you been able to overcome? And even when in what I'd call a normal year, right, where you're at a 3 to 5% rent growth and you're just leasing on pace and not 10 or 15% ahead year over year, if you're ready for that next step, in my mind, there's a lot of things that you need to demonstrate. Number one is your experience, and that's time and tenure, right? How long have you been in that position? And especially if we're talking leasing manager to manager, manager to regional manager, how many product types have you worked in? If you've been a community manager at one property in one market in one type of apartment community, that's not a lot of experience even to have done really well to say that you're ready for that next step.
Yeah.
And so I think that everybody should also do a little bit of self-reflecting. We all want the next step, we all we all want to strive and achieve our goals, but sometimes we have to take a hard look and say, am I really ready for that? Have I done enough? Have I proven what I can really do?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I don't think that's to be the case. And it's not to discourage anyone, but certainly there there needs to be time and experience to really prepare yourself to be successful, because one of the things I explain to people is success in one position does not guarantee your success at the next level.
Hmm.
And so our job as leaders is to prepare you. Now, I think it's important for leaders to have those conversations. I hear you. I hear that you're ready for next step. Here's what I think that we should work on. Here's a plan. Here's a timeline. These are the things that I'd like to see you accomplish to make sure that you're ready for that next step. Because nobody wants, as a leader, I certainly don't want to put someone in the position that I don't think that they're ready for, they're not going to be successful in. I'm not doing them a
Right.
service. I'm not doing my team a service, and I'm not doing the organization or the owner of that asset a service in doing so.
Yeah.
Um, self-reflection and making sure that you are truly in that position, and having conversations with people who can be honest and direct and help you analyze where your strengths are and what opportunities you have to set yourself up for success, just in the short and in the long term.
Yeah. No, I think you're 100% right on that. Finding a mentor or someone to actually, like you said, be honest with you and say, "Hey, yeah, you have some natural abilities and skills, but you need to put them to the test.
Hmm.
And here's your steps to get to where you want to go." Because I mean, you look at your history of work, you've been all over the country in multiple companies and multiple jobs and roles. And so it doesn't just overnight happen.
It does not. And that's a great point. So multiple roles, multiple locations. So I made a conscious decision very early in my career that I did not want to live outside of Orlando. That was my personal choice, and I knew it was going to hold back my career path, and it did. I was offered and I interviewed for many jobs that I could have escalated my career path quicker than what I did, but that wasn't a concession I was willing to make. And I was okay with that decision, and I'm still okay with that decision today. Um, but um, I did travel, so there was another level of sacrifice. And
Right.
I haven't worked on site. I've had a home office since, oh my God, 2002, maybe. Like literally 20 years, I have not been in an office because I was
Yeah.
remote and I was traveling. And most weeks that I traveled, which was, I'd say on average 3 out of 4 weeks out of the month, a lot of times I left on Sunday evening because my supervisor didn't tell me I had to, but in my mind, I was again trying to prove my value and my worth. And so I didn't want to
Mhm.
lose a day traveling or worry about delays. So I'd fly out on Sunday evening and I'd hit the ground running on Monday morning. I'd beat the property manager to the community, and then not take the latest flight out home on Thursday, not getting home until, 10 p.m. midnight, and having one day back in the office. And so um, there was a lot of time away from my family. I mean, for a long time, I didn't have a family. I was still very young in my career, but like I said, my twins just turned 10. And, when I went to work for Michael's and started the management company for their student housing developments, my kids weren't even in kindergarten yet. So, I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
the exact year, but call it 3, 4 years old. And I was leaving on Sunday evening to be at the corporate office on Monday morning, and I beat everyone else there. And I wasn't leaving till Friday night. And I did that for months on end because they hired me to do a job. They took a chance because I said, I'm not moving to New Jersey. They're like, fine, but you have to make it work. And so I never wanted to give anyone any reason to doubt or think that I wasn't getting the job done. And when you're starting a management company, being in an office and collaborating with people is really important part of that job. It didn't, it didn't extend on years after that, but there has to be concessions, and whether it's moving to go be a manager or leasing manager in different markets to get that experience, or being on the road, chances are you're going to have to do one or two of those things, if not both, at some point in your career to get you the experience that you truly need if you want to move up in the industry.
For sure. Now, that all being said, is there anything decision-wise that you wish you would have done differently, and maybe would be a nugget to share with those young people that want to move up?
I do wish I had physically moved to other locations when I was younger and didn't have a family. Looking back, there's so much of opportunities before you choose to settle down. And whether it's just with a partner or having kids, and your life kind of takes a different path. I think for the most part, a lot of people still put a huge commitment on starting and getting their career off their ground straight out of college, right? And so looking back, I kind of do wish I was like, well, what's a year here or a year there? 2 or 3 years, you're back home. The time flies, and it's over before you know it. So in hindsight, I definitely would have chosen to go to a different location instead of just strictly being a road warrior and traveling.
Yeah. I could have done similar, been more okay with moving around and stuff. But again, I guess for me, I haven't taken a direct route in any one industry. I've hopped around industries and
Yeah.
stuff. So, there's all that. There's that too. But you don't know until you know, right? Take a position,
You
try out an
don't.
industry.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, there's a lot of skills that are definitely transferable. So we hire people. I mean, everybody does this, right? But especially when you're looking for on-site team members, we're a people business. We don't call ourselves, but a lot of what we do is hospitality. And so getting people who work at hotels or restaurants or bartenders or rental car locations. Actually, that's how Carol came to us. Carol worked the front desk at a hotel. Now, see, it's
Yep.
all coming back to me.
Yep.
But those skills are so transferable. And the same as you move up in your career and you become more operations focused, and the things that we do to manage a multi-million dollar asset and what that takes, both in across the board, but general operations and management of people really does go well. So if at any point it's just too much and you look for something else in an industry, I think this career is a great starting point, if nothing else, to give you great experience to move on to something else that's more interesting to you in the future.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, when you're working on site at a community, you're doing so many different types of business and learning business acumen at a high level, because you're doing marketing, you're doing operations, you're managing a big budget and in a significant asset that is
Yeah.
worth a lot of money. So, and you have a staff and all the things. So it's like, those are all things, especially once you become a community manager, for instance, there's just so much there that you can take somewhere else. You kind of become like, well, if anything, you get exposure to maybe different aspects that you really enjoy, whether it's marketing or operations or, whatever it is, obviously.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. But again, you can take that anywhere, right? If
sure.
you get into it and you lean, whether you go towards the corporate marketing path, if marketing's your thing, clearly now so much of what we do is in digital marketing, SEO, yeah, whatever. You do that, you can do that in any industry, so again, those skills are transferable to go work in any other space, and still be able to perform those core functions related to a very specific job.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, that's cool. I would, and there's so many people that don't know about this industry. I guess it's similar with a lot of different types of work. Um, but there's such a need, I think, to educate people on this opportunity.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think that the growing number of property management degrees in the country, it's a great start. I mean, I think we have a real long way to go. But I would love to see more companies, and not just student, but all property management companies, really make an effort to do outreach in high schools, right? Career days. You can have a fantastic career if college isn't your thing. You can still make a great living in so many different ways. Or to your point, if you're really into accounting, HR, IT, digital marketing, you can go to
right.
school and get a degree in any of those things and be super successful in the property management industry. And so I think as an industry, we just need to do a little bit better about creating awareness. I know NAA and their Apartment Careers Month is trying to, help showcase the industry in that regard. Don't even get started on the technical side of things with the
Right.
facilities team. That's a whole nother ball field, right? But
Right.
if we could all just do better in the community, again, going back to communities, right? The communities that we serve, it doesn't have to be at the corporate level. I mean, not telling you what to do without corporate approval, of course, but if you operate a couple sites, go talk to the local high school. There are always students that aren't going to college that are looking for a career, and if you can open up those doors and those opportunities for them and let them know what's out there, it's for the best for everybody.
Yep. Yeah, and we really need to do that. And actually, one of my guests, I don't know if you know her, Aishia, she was on just a couple weeks ago. She just went to an event, I think in Florida, Orlando, a DECA event
Oh yeah,
to promote the industry, which is cool because those are younger kids and
absolutely.
gaining exposure to a different industry at a young age. So things like that, I think, are invaluable to bring a greater awareness to things like property management.
100%. Well, my kids had career day earlier this year and I signed
Uh-huh.
up. So that was real fun teaching
Yeah.
kids about property management. But we talked about marketing and they got to design their own amenities that other kids would think was cool if they lived there. So it was a
Okay.
good time.
Nice.
Starting young, 4th grade.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I don't think that's been offered to me yet. So
Yeah.
that'd be fun to do. That's fun. All right. And so kind of in the same vein, really the convergence of optimizing performance in your personal and professional life. And then you had some I guess, core things that drive you in that. You mentioned the 4 agreements, which
Hmm.
I don't know what those are, so I'd love to learn about that. Giving grace, which is super important, and learning to say no.
Yeah. So the whole work-life balance thing is a crock. there's there's no such thing as balance.
Yeah,
I really think of it more as allocation. You have so many hours in a day.
yeah,
You got more things to get done than you'll ever get done, right? I could I could take a year off work. I could keep myself busy with things between my family and things I've wanted to do at my house and never bat an eye. I mean, clearly. Same goes for the reverse, right? I could work 16 hours a day, fill my day every minute of 16 hours a day without a problem. Neither one of those are ever going to happen, right? So to me, it's not about balancing, it's about allocating your time. And so
hmm
ever how many hours you give yourself in a day, minus the sleep, right? So between taking care of yourself, whatever that means, your own physical and mental health, spending time with your family, and working, I'll put in the 3 major buckets. You have to prioritize every single day differently.
hmm
Some days your family's going to take priority. Sometimes it's planned, sometimes it's not planned. Um, And so when you're looking at your calendar, whether you make your to-do list the night before, the morning of, we all have whatever works for us. But ultimately, when you think about it, that's what you're doing, is you're allocating how you're going to spend your time every day. And you're never going to give as much time to your family as you want. And you're never going to give as much time to your work as what you want. And you just have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
But getting to the bottom of, for that particular day, what's non-negotiable, right? This podcast for me was non-negotiable. My kid got detention. I was supposed to pick him up. I'm like, I can't pick him up. Somebody else is gonna have to hold him for a minute. Like, I'll be there later. This has been scheduled for 3 months. I think I was crazy. I was like, no, you'll have to keep him there a little longer. He was not happy about it, but it'll be fine. Yeah. So along with that, once you accept that and relieve yourself, give yourself grace. So you mentioned that. I think giving grace is important. Number one, you have to give grace to yourself. And that's the hardest thing for most of us to do, because we're usually our own worst critic, right? And we all feel that we have to give 110% to everyone, to everything at all times. And you can't do that. It's not manageable. So I would say that for me, having kids really was what helped me reset that. Not in the beginning. It was definitely several years process, but when they got to the point where I was missing things because I wasn't traveling, or because I was traveling, excuse me, it makes you reprioritize things. Right. And so I learned to take a step back. Part of that is leadership. Part of that is taking and giving responsibility to my team members so that I have more capacity. And it goes both ways. It relieves me and it helps prepare my team. I'm helping, it's not a matter of, here, do this, I don't have time. It's, I'm going to teach you how to do something. This is going to help prepare you for the next step in your career. I'm definitely the person that's guilty of, I want to do as much of it as I can. I'm slightly a control freak, which again, I'm getting way better at than what I was 10 years ago. And it feels good to release myself personally of some burden. And it also feels really good to help prepare my team for the next step. And the other part of giving grace, I'll come back to in a second, but the 4 agreements. This is a book. It's not a big, long book. It's a very easy read. It's literally called The 4 Agreements. I highly suggest, everybody take a read, but it's a very simple concept. Number 1, be impeccable with your word. So at first glance, you're like, wow, well, just be truthful. And yes, that is part of it. It is say what you mean, do what you say. But it also is the significance of speaking with integrity and carefully choosing your words before you say them aloud. Oof. And so that's something that already earlier today, I was like, man, I could have said that a little differently. I could have been a little nicer when it came out.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's probably the one that I find is a constant, just reminder. Just trying to be nicer and kinder when you're moving at 100 miles an hour and you're, you've got one stressor, and the person that you're talking to on a sidebar conversation has no idea what you're going through on the sidebar, right? So trying to recenter yourself and take each conversation that you have with somebody and make it the best it can be. Yeah. So that's the first one. The second one is don't take anything personally. Other people's experiences, their perceptions, how they act, that's on them. And it's nothing to do with you. And probably the one that was the hardest for me to learn was this one. And at some point it just clicked. And I can tell you, I've just let things work related, especially personally, it's a little harder, but professionally in the workspace, I can let the clients that are upset and yelling and, the emergencies that happen at the property, it just rolls off my back. I didn't do it. I didn't cause it. Yeah. I'm just here to help make it right, and the amount of stress that I bear on my shoulders is so much more manageable because I don't take it personally, and I'm just happier at work because of it. And then the third one's don't make assumptions. Again, I'm pretty quick to jump to conclusions without maybe getting the full story. And the key here is really just ask questions, make sure you're really on the same page, clarify your communication. It's going to save you a lot of time and agony in the long run. Pick up the phone and call somebody.
Yeah.
You know, I'm huge on video teams. Certainly I'll chat someone. But I like to just have a face-to-face conversation. I can have it in 30 seconds and we can just get on the same page and then go on and move on about our day. But with the don't make assumptions is that giving grace part. And so when you hear something and it comes across wrong, especially in email, and you're like, ooh, that was snippy. Why'd they say it like that? Number one, give grace until you can have that follow-up conversation.
Right.
Don't make the assumptions about the intent behind it. But that's something at RPM that it's kind of a mini mantra, I guess, if you will, at the leadership level that we're trying really hard to pass down through our organization. And that's another way of saying giving grace is assume good intent. And we have tremendous people. I mean, I absolutely love the people at RPM. And I think a lot of it is because we're doing pretty well overall as an organization of assuming good intent. So we've got a lot of brilliant people, a lot of associates that are just fantastic at their job that they've been hired to do. And so when you assume that they have everyone else's best interest in mind, whether it's us as colleagues, whether it's the property, whether it's the business, and whatever is happening is coming from a good place, it's a lot easier to not make assumptions to the negative and to give grace to people. And it just makes for a better working environment overall. And then the last one, number 4, is always do your best. And again, this is almost one of those things that seem like kind of goes without saying. Yeah. But when you think of it in the sense of for yourself, I mean, obviously you want to prove your worth, right? But when you know that you always do your best, you avoid self-judgment and regret, and then you can live your life free of guilt and self-ridicule, because even when you mess up, you're like, well, I gave it my all. I couldn't have done anything differently, or I couldn't have tried harder. And again, it's just freeing to not have that weight of feeling guilty or feeling bad because you, pardon my French, but you half-assed it along the way,
Yeah.
And so it's something that actually Barry Nichols, I don't think you've had her on, but I know Carol's talked about Barry and as well, one of my mentors. She's the one that shared that with me years ago, and it's really stuck with me. And I think for 4 principles that are so simplistic, they are so impactful in both professional and personal ways, and the way the two converge and how each one affects the other. Because I promise you, being so much happier and less stressed at work makes me a better parent, and I enjoy my personal time so much more.
Right. Very true. Yes, they definitely interact, don't they? Personal and professional. It's not like you can just shut one off and then go into the other. So in either direction.
No, it doesn't work that way. Of course not. Yeah.
You can. Some people can fake it, I guess, but it's wrecking their health probably.
It is, and you know what? It's exhausting to fake things.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable for the long term. And it's kind of like lying. You're having to constantly check yourself of how was I supposed to be acting or behaving in this situation or this circumstance. And the more you allow yourself to be free and natural, it's easier.
Yeah, for sure. One of the last things you mentioned was the when to say no. Is that something you've had to learn, or comes natural?
No, it definitely doesn't come natural. I'm a Virgo. I like things by the book. I'm a people pleaser, especially professionally. I was always very just driven academically. I got that from my parents. Got to get straight A's and got to get a scholarship to go to college because you don't have a college fund. I was like, okay, no pressure. So, whether it was as a kid, just doing as I was told and figuring it out and not understanding that it's okay to have boundaries. Um, because yes, even kids should have boundaries. They should have a voice and learn that they can set boundaries, which I hope we're starting to teach our kids now as well. It's really hard to unlearn that. Um, and what makes it even more difficult is when you are the yes person, you end up getting taken advantage of. Because
Mm,
I guarantee you, everyone listening can think of someone they work with, and they know if they go and say, "Hey, Bob, I need you to do X, Y, and Z." Bob's never going to say no. And guess what? Everybody goes to Bob. And you know what?
mm,
Bob needs a break.
yeah.
Bob's ready to lose his mind because he's overstressed and he's doing too many things because Bob doesn't know how to say no.
Hmm.
Right. So if you're Bob
Yeah.
in this instance, and I'm not saying always say no, right? But you have to have boundaries for yourself, again, personally and professionally. Um, certainly proving your worth means saying yes a lot of times. It means volunteering to do something above and beyond, whether it's your time, whether it's filling in for somebody who's on maternity leave and you're doing dual roles for 3 months. It can take on so many different forms and shapes. So those can be fantastic opportunities for both learning, expanding your skill set, um, preparing yourself. And it's a great opportunity to get involved in community and volunteering and spending time with family. But if it gets to the point that it's detrimental to the things that are really important, or the job you were hired to do, you're all of a sudden not excelling at because you've got 10 other things that have been thrown on you by other people, and
Yeah.
your primary work product is suffering, then it's time to step back and figure out and learn when to say no. And there's a nice way to do it, and there's a professional and a polite way to do it. And you can offer other suggestions. I've got a lot on my plate right now, but I think so and so might have some capacity, or I think so and so might have some really good ideas about that topic. And you're still being a good colleague, you're still being a good partner or family member. And people will respect you when you have your own boundaries as well.
Yeah. It's true. And they won't walk all over you.
Exactly.
Here's another thing. I don't want to do this. Here's yet another thing you can do.
Yeah.
Because you're
I
so
mean, it
good at it.
happens. Yeah.
So good
Oh,
at it.
yeah, of course. Let me flatter you while I give you more work to do while I drink my coffee.
Exactly. I'll watch you do it. It'll be great. That's yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all those. The 4 agreements, I mean, they're all very straightforward, but it's one of those things that I think, sometimes forget to put into practice, right? To actually live by things like being a person of your word, and actually
Mm-hmm.
what you say is what you do, and um, taking things personally, man. That's
It's so hard.
oh yeah, it can definitely be hard, and especially depending on who it comes from, right? Because if
Yeah.
it's somebody that you're working with, that you respect or whatever, it can like really hit you hard. And so yeah, it's learning to, well, I mean, ask questions, right? Like to actually dig into it a little bit more and ask for more feedback, and not just taking it at face value and
Yeah.
killing you.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're right. I mean, there are, I don't know, what, thousands, tens of thousands, ever how many business books, and there's such great advice, and you read it, you're like, man, this is great,
Yeah.
but it starts to become clutter in your mind. There's only so many things that you can retain or put in practice. And that's why I love these 4, because they're so simple, but they're so impactful. And
Right.
they're, a little just blurb, a tiny little half a post-it on the corner of your monitor that you can just kind of check yourself glancing at every once in a while. And everything else, I think from there, you just build on and kind of falls into place.
Mhm.
But if you're knocking it out of the park with those 4, probably going to be in pretty good shape otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you sprinkle over all this is having some self-awareness, right? Like the first thing you even mentioned about, knowing your worth kind of fits in with all that. And there's also knowing your worth, but like being realistic about
Yes.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like actually taking in the feedback coming in from around you and assessing the real situation, and
Yeah.
not the kumbaya that you think.
Yeah. And if you're not getting that feedback, or you're questioning, you know, what that is, or how you're perceived by whomever, you know, your superiors, your leadership, your colleagues, there's nothing wrong with asking. Have those private conversations, and be open to hearing, and set that tone. Say, you know, I really want feedback. I mean, if it's positive, wonderful. I want to know what I'm doing well so I can keep doing those things well.
Right.
And, you know, if there's opportunities that I can improve, you know, I'd love to hear them. And I hope that whoever you feel comfortable asking that of and having that conversation with respects you enough to give, um, you know, real critical feedback, positive or negative, because they're both equally valuable. Because a lot of things you can knowing what you do well is just as important as knowing, you know, what areas you need to work on. So,
Yeah.
you know, we've all, everybody's got their strengths as well, and to
Right.
keep
Right.
focusing on that, is always important too.
It is. Well, thanks for the pep talk.
Yes.
I'm gonna go do all those things now.
Great.
No, but seriously, it's always a good reminder. It's always good um, to hear this stuff and then actually put it into practice.
Yeah.
But
It
a big
is.
piece of this is finding that person that can be honest with you and to kind of point out the things that are lacking or the things that you need to work on. So get that mentor, get that person in your life that's going to be not your yes person, but
Yeah.
your
Correct.
honest person.
Yeah. And look, those could be the same, or they could be two different, right? It's great to have a cheerleader, somebody that is rooting for you in your corner. You know, everybody needs that. Sometimes that person can also have the hard conversations with you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they can't. So
Right.
if it's not the same person, find your other person that you
Yeah.
can have those tough conversations with.
Yeah. And you were mentioning Barry Nichols. Now,
Yeah.
is that somebody that's been an ongoing mentor of yours?
Ongoing mentor. I mean, I met her as soon as I got into property management. In fact, I met her while I was still working for the university before I made the transition. And Barry's specialty is leasing and marketing, and she's just still one of my most. She has the biggest heart of any person I've ever met. So I love her genuinely as the person. She wants everyone to succeed and everyone to do well, and she will help everyone to the best of their ability. She's also just fantastically skilled in her job and what she's able to accomplish, getting student housing assets leased up. And you know, she's a friend and a mentor, and you know, I wish I could work side by side with her every single day. But she's one of the best in the business, and definitely one of the primary originator OG leasing and marketing people in the student housing space. So she's amazing.
Nice. Well, now I need to meet her.
Now you do. You have to meet Barry.
I don't remember hearing her name, but you know what? I've met so many new people in the last year that it's just like my brain is like overloaded.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll make an introduction.
That'd be awesome. That would
Yeah.
be so good. Well, thank you so much for all that you shared, for being here on Boss Talks, episode 41. And I'm really excited for you because you're ramping up for Turn,
Yes.
the Super Bowl of student housing
Right
that
around the corner.
everybody is basically spending all year getting ready for.
Yeah, we're at T-minus 90 days. The countdown is on.
Do you have a countdown? Do you have a clock somewhere or like a ticker somewhere to really remind you of what's about to hit?
I don't, but I think subconsciously I do. I start having dreams around this time of, you know, the recurring things that happen or you're worried about. So it'll probably always be there at this point. I can't get away from it.
Right. For sure. And then is there a new, like, you're obviously over operations.
Mm-hmm.
So is there something new that you've come across that you'd love to share with others that's made your life easier when it comes to turn or student
Ooh.
housing? When it comes, maybe it's a software, maybe it's a thing other than software. I don't know. It could be something else.
That's a great question, man. I wish I had a better answer for this. I mean, so much of what we do, I go back to is tried and true. I mean, the basics of student housing is fundamentally the same as it was when I started, 23 years ago. Certainly, the technology has evolved and made a lot of our jobs easier, more streamlined, more efficient, and I love that. We're an Entrada shop, and I'm always the biggest advocate for them on the student side specifically. One of the things that I think is newer, I know there's a handful of student housing properties that are started using it, but we're about to roll out pet screening, which I'm stoked about. Because again, 20 some years ago, no, we don't allow pets in student housing. Like they're just going to tear everything up. And you move to today where basically everybody allows pets and everybody knows the issues that we have between pets and ESAs and illegal and blah, 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 blah. So I'm super stoked to get that program rolled out and get that administrative responsibility off of our site teams and actually be able to collect some ancillary income for people who get caught with pets that they're not supposed to have, because it's all being recorded and tracked, and vaccination and, way more sophisticated and detailed than what we're able to do manually today. So nothing, earth shattering, so to speak, but it's hopefully going to help a huge headache that we have in the student world. So I'm looking forward to that this coming year.
Nice. And big shout out to Victoria and pet screening. I'm assuming that's who you're going with. She was on the show earlier in this year, and I had the privilege of meeting her in person most recently. So anyways.
Yeah. Great group of people over there.
Yeah. Well, Heather, it's been great. Thank you so much for being on today. And for those that watched, we really appreciate your participation in the chat. And just like Heather and others have jumped into Boss Talks, you too can be a guest. Just got to reach out to me. We'll have a short conversation. But otherwise, I just want to know why you're a boss. Because Heather is truly a boss. She's a boss in this industry. And it's great to get to know you more. And hopefully we're going to get to know each other in person at NAA.
Yes.
Coming up here shortly. And so if anybody else wants to be on the show, just let me know. Otherwise, it's been Boss Talks, episode 41. It's going to be next week too, just Wednesday, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So check us out every Wednesday. Join us in these conversations. It's been so much fun, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Evan.
Bye for now.